The great Dr. Joe Rigney. He's a fellow of theology at New St. Andrews College. He's the associate pastor of Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho, and author of the very famous book now, The Sin of Empathy. What's it? Infamous, famous, controversial? How do you like to introduce your book?
It depends on who I'm talking to. It depends on whether they
That's right.
liked it or not, I suppose, right?
I'll call it the must-read Sin of Empathy.
That's right. The must read. Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. Where did this? We know like the Marxist backgrounds and everything, but give me like the steel man for your average person who's like, oh, DEI, nice, good. I'm kind and loving. What's going on in someone's brain?
Yeah, I suspect that a lot of it, the best case for it would be America has historically discriminated against certain races and ethnicities or genders. And, historically, Jim Crow, blacks were unable to get certain jobs or unable to do certain things, navigate society because of legal and cultural oppression. And so, as a kind of remedy for that, kind of post civil rights movement, Civil Rights Act, kind of unleashed, the attempt to kind of like rightwise that. And I think for a lot of people, it's initially sold as level the playing field. We judge people, the MLK is classic. We judge people on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And I think everybody was kind of on board with that. But the legal regime unleashed by the civil rights movement basically was just asking for someone to come along and start to put the hand on the scales the other way. And I think for a long time, honestly, from the 90s into the 2000s, there was sort of this subtle agreement that like because of that past that past racial caste system in America, that white folks will just kind of have to put up with a little bit of affirmative action or what have you, little hand on the scales as a way of balancing out the past. And then I think what happened over the last 10 to 15 years is that basically the left just turned it up to 11 and decided we're just going to drive this thing as far as it will possibly go. And we've seen that what DEI actually has meant is discrimination against whites, particularly against white men. Like that's what actually it meant. It meant if you're qualified as a white, you're not going to get the job because we have to rectify these past wrongs.
It's a good steel man that you laid out there. Why is it bad? Maybe we can bring some theology into this too. Like, what's the
Yes.
problem with righting the
Yeah.
wrongs of
Well,
the
I mean,
past?
yeah. So because it doesn't actually right the wrongs of the past. It's this sort of like the two wrongs don't make a right principle. It's like the Chief Justice John Roberts, who I'm not a huge fan of, but in the famous decision, I think striking down affirmative action, he said the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. It's like this, really, whoa moment of legal reasoning. But that's actually the truth. If you want to act, otherwise you end up in this racial and ethnic spoil system where it's simply a fight as people kind of identify with different groups or so I'm gonna play up certain aspects of my identity, whether it's my race or my background or my sexuality or my gender, and I'm going to use those as levers to get ahead. And when you basically say those are the rules of the game, you're setting up a really nasty rivalry system, which I think we're actually seeing play out right now. I think some of the what's going on with the Somali fraud is downstream from all of this because the way that sort of thing was able to last for so long is that anybody who said, "Hey, I don't know that this is actually a daycare," was accused of being a racist. And so it was like, well, I don't want to be a racist. But the whole system is set up to privilege certain ethnic groups as a way of rectifying those past wrongs. But in reality, what it's doing is enabling present wrongs, whether fraud or, as Jeremy Carl in his great book, "The Unprotected Class." It's the best book on what the DEI regime actually has been. Is about the systematic discrimination against whites over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
What then, if we don't judge based on skin color or ethnic whatever, what are the virtues that we used to in our society judge on? And what do you think we should therefore get back to? If we're not going to discriminate on X, what do we discriminate and have discernment based on?
Yeah, so the steel man for the right to discriminate is something like I want people who are a cultural fit for my company, say in my hiring practices. I want to be able to hire people that I think will fit the culture of my company. And what people recognize is that sometimes that meant certain people who might have sort of the basic qualifications weren't a good fit and could be passed over. And I actually think that that's part of just free association. I think people, this is the right to associate with those you want is kind of a fundamental basic element of human sociality. Um, and yet at the same time, it obviously can be used and weaponized in ways where you systematically box out a particular group of citizens. And I think that's an important thing. I don't think it's wrong, for example, to discriminate and say we're not going to hire from overseas because we want to privilege and benefit our own nation. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing. But the virtues we should be looking for are things like, well, is this person show up on time? Do they work hard? Are they a cultural fit? And I think that that's what a lot of companies are actually looking for is can someone do the job? Is their basic competence? And instead, what the DEI regime enabled was it doesn't matter if you're competent. It doesn't matter if you're skilled. What matters is the rainbow or the skin color graph that we can put up on our advertising in order to communicate that we're good people. And I think that's a key element of part of what the DEI regime has done is it shifted businesses, education away from competence and excellence toward a kind of signaling of virtue that we are good people because we have X amount of minorities or X amount of women or X amount of, and it was not about, are we doing a good job? It wasn't about excellence any longer. And so I think that what we ought to be, judged on, and what companies ought to be oriented to is, are we putting out a good product or a good service? Are we doing a good job? And for that, then you simply look at, well, who are the people that are going to help me pursue excellence in my work?
What is your advice to the Christian listening today who works someplace or goes to school someplace where they still have this DEI worldview, this DEI mindset, because it's still out there, even if they maybe change the name to belonging or whatever. And they're still maybe scared of being called a racist or whatever, or you're going to lose their job or whatever. Like, what's your advice on how a Christian should navigate this?
Yeah, I think, so I think my advice actually is different than it would have been, say, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, in the height of, peak DEI, peak wokeness, there would be an element of wisely navigated, especially if you're the breadwinner who has to provide for your family. Sometimes you just got to kind of navigate it. I think at this point, given some of the backlash against this sort of thing, it's time to actually stand up and be counted. There is a growing sense among a lot of folks that this is unacceptable, that you don't have to put up with it, and that the cowardice that enabled it over time, a number of people who knew, yeah, it was going on, but I just kept my head down. It's like, it's time for that to go. There is a moment, and at this point, you don't have to be the first. You don't have to be the tip of the spear. You're actually following in the wake of a lot of folks who have had a lot of courage to stand up and say, hey, actually, we are just saying we're not hiring white people. That's what the actual conversation is. And you can just cut right through that. And there's actually, with the Trump administration, I think there actually is legal recourse if you find that your company decides to crack down on you for objecting. There is legal recourse. And so I think now is the moment to kind of tip the scales back towards something more like a meritocracy, where we're actually looking at, we are judging people based on the content of the character or the quality of their work, rather than simply, the melanin content, which is a really stupid way to evaluate human beings.
Last question for you, got about 60 seconds. Where does the sin of empathy, where does empathy come into this, and how can a Christian proceed with a meritocracy when I should be more empathetic to the people who have been marginalized over all these decades?
Right. Well, I think that's part of how it got in. Was it was branded as, this is the compassionate thing to do, as a kind of restitution for past wrongs. But the problem is with true biblical restitution, there's always a boundedness and a specificity. So, when the Bible says, if you stole something, you need to return it fivefold. Well, that's a number, and you can actually know when your debt's paid. With the DEI regime, it was an unending obligation of, you always have to you're the one who's going to get kicked, and you just have to learn to take it. You're permanently guilty. And so Christians should have nothing whatsoever to do with that kind of permanent underclass view, that white guilt view, that they're just totally get away from that. And instead think in terms of actual, pursuit of excellence and biblical compassion, which is tethered to reality, not untethered to and off in its own, following the whims of popular opinion.
Great. Dr. Joe Rigney, as always, Fellow of Theology at New St. Andrews College. And go get the book, The Sin of Empathy. Dr. Rigney, great to talk to you, sir. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, Mike.
What's the solution to DEI? Easy. Judging people. Judging people based on behavior. Not the most shallow, ridiculous thing ever, which is skin color or sexual preference. Is ridiculous. Judge people based on behavior. Everything is so upside down and backwards from the left, always, right? That's what they do. That's what Karl did. That's what Karl Marx did. And you hear people on the left, they'll say, they'll take good things and they'll spin it around. All right, so they'll say like, oh, you shouldn't judge people. You shouldn't judge. People who have never read the Bible ever will say, oh, the Bible says don't judge. How ridiculous. Jesus talked about hypocritical judgment, where you condemn someone while ignoring your own sin. All right, that's the Matthew 7, verse 10. Judge not that you be not judged, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And that's when Jesus said, do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but you don't notice that the log is in your own? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. But the left doesn't see it that way. What they say is, you Christian, you normal thinking person with wisdom and discernment have to ignore all bad things. That was the first step. First, you have to ignore bad things. And then, as the Bible warned us, woe to those, you have to now celebrate the wicked and the perverse behavior at all times, always. That's what they told us. And then we're like, I don't want to do that actually, that's bad. Oh, who are you to judge? No, of course, I'm a thinking adult. Of course you are called to judge properly. You as a Christian are called to judge with discernment and wisdom. And you are to judge according to God's word. Yes, God is the ultimate judge of people's souls. Whether they go to heaven or hell, you don't judge that. But while here on earth, we are called to use our best judgment in the way, use our best judgment so that we can lead a society, people and a society to the most human flourishing possible. And we should be a society celebrating certain behavior and condemning other behavior. For instance, we shouldn't be shouting our abortions. Okay, this behavior should be condemned. We should not condone lying and cheating and stealing and theft and fraud. I don't care what country you're from. I don't care if you're from Somalia or whatever. We can't condone this stuff. We have to condemn this. And we need to create systems that disincentivize it. One disincentive would be if you do it, you go to jail, for instance. But at the very least, there should be no gain, there should be no advantage, no benefit from sinful behavior. But our society today has flipped it around. We celebrate wickedness and perversion and weakness. That's how it goes. If you incentivize something, you'll get more of it. And if you create these systems that allow this sinful behavior to go on, you'll get more of it. Elon Musk the other day shared a video. This was in response to the Somali fraud that was going on. And he shared a video of a woman from Brazil who said in Brazil, they have something they call the Brazilian way. And that says if you want to get anything done, you have to be corrupt. You have to engage in corruption. You have to pay people off. And it's created this culture of always finding the shortcut, right? Never doing it the right way, never doing hard work, you always got to find the shortcut, who to pay off, all that stuff, right? They call it the Brazilian way. We don't want that to be the American way. The American way has always been hard work and excellence. The American way, I'll give you an example. The American way is what makes it possible for us to engage in a perfect military operation to get Maduro in the middle of the night, in the middle of the capital of Venezuela with 0 American casualties. That's insane. That's excellence. There's no DEI on Delta Force. We need to incentivize virtue. Actually, let me go more on that Delta Force analogy. What if everything operated like Delta Force? Who's the best? There's no one looks at Delta Force, like the Navy SEALs, right? No one looks at Navy SEALs like, I don't know, we need more whatever. We're not enough gay people here, not enough of this, not enough of that. No, it doesn't matter. Just want the best. Who's the best? Period. And how do you get that? How do you get the best in Delta Force? Well, you have these incentive systems. You have a system where you rise the ranks and you go in these different directions and you excel based on your merit, based on virtue. Can you pass these courses? Right? Are you an excellent leader? Here's the virtues that we believe in that you must show, that have, in order to make it to the next round of this and that, right? That we created this system in Delta Force to get the best of the best, where we have these guys who can even do that. Why don't we have that in every other system in America? We used to. We used to incentivize virtue. It used to be our ethos, everything we did. John Adams said, public virtue cannot exist in a nation without private virtue. And public virtue is the only foundation of republics. You know, we can have a country unless we were people of virtue. What virtues? We got to run. We don't have too much time left. We should do a whole series. Maybe I'll do this on my podcast. Politics by Faith is my podcast. We should do a day on each one of these virtues. So Aristotle had 11, and each had a deficit and then too much of these virtues. You got to try to find the golden mean. But his 11 virtues were courage, temperance, liberality, magnificence. That's a fun one. Magnanimity, ambition, proper ambition, truthfulness, wittiness, friendliness, modesty, and righteous indignation. It's a good starting list, right? Aristotle, we'll start with that. But everything we do in our society needs to be to encourage these things. And the way to encourage these things, one of them is to hire based on who has the most of these things. Who has the most of these virtues? These people. Great. We need to have this ongoing culture of competition of who can best demonstrate these virtues every single day in their family and their friendships and at their work. And this is how we judge people, should be judging people. And yeah, some people won't get that promotion. Some people won't get the advancement. Some people won't get all the rewards of a society that promotes based off of virtue. What happened was all those people who didn't excel, they got together and they rewrote the game. So led by Karl Marx, who was a total degenerate loser. Karl Marx was a total wicked, vengeful, greedy son of a you-know-what. This guy was wicked in every way. He hated everyone. He was lazy. He was a drunk. He was an awful person. No one knew him he wasn't famous when he was alive. He just would wait for his family members to die so he could get an inheritance from them. He was like a terrible person. Cheated on his wife. Denied the kid that was born from his maid that he cheated. It's like a terrible, awful person in every way. He would just go around destroying things that he was a part of, organization. And of course he would come up with a system that would reward vice. Of course Karl would do that. And people like Karl are attracted to Karl's worldview. And those people got a lot of power and they rewrote the game. And now we have whole systems that reward vice. And it's not going to end well. Luckily, we stopped it before it got too entrenched. Part of the golden era is getting back to rewarding virtue. I'll share one biblical story here. When God picked David, he didn't look the part. David didn't. He was the youngest son. He was a shepherd. His dad Jesse didn't even call him downstairs when Samuel came by to announce the next king. 1 Samuel 16, Eliab was the oldest brother. And Samuel saw him. Right? Samuel saw him and said, "Oh, surely this is the guy. This is the king. No doubt. Look at this guy." It's all because of how he looked. But 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him," the older brother. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. God chose David because of his heart. This is how we need to judge people as well. This is a major part of the American golden era. I have a podcast called Politics by Faith. We take the news of the day, run it through a biblical filter, make a biblical point, like we just did right there, pretty much every day over my podcast, Politics by Faith, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Please join us over there whenever you can. Politics by Faith. Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word.